Hi, I'm Caroline Stocks with Pig Health Today, and with me is Jarrod Sutton, who's Senior Vice President of Strategy Innovation at the National Pork Board. Jarrod, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, you work with a lot of downstream pork customers, retailers, and people like McDonald's. What's their current view of the pork industry in the US today?
I would say it's very favorable. Clearly, the consumer trends are in our favor. Pork's the number one consumed protein around the world, and certainly our domestic customers experience that through lots of product offerings. And so they're very much in a collaborative spirit. How do we ensure that we're meeting our consumer expectations? How do we tighten our supply chain to deliver on what consumers needs? And how do we continue to innovate to take advantage of emerging trends?
Do you think that their opinion of the industry's changed at all in the last few years?
I do. It's definitely one of trust, confidence. The pork industry is a great collaborator. The industry itself collaborates very well. The industry collaborates very well with its full supply chain. And so we've definitely built a lot of confidence with our downstream customers. And quite candidly, it's because we meet their expectations and oftentimes exceed their expectations.
Now, antibiotic use is a big issue in livestock production at the minute. What are retailers and other customers' views of it in terms of pig production?
So you do have customers all across the board who are saying, we're just going to get rid of antibiotics in our complete supply chain. We don't want them in any of our meat products. And a wise veterinarian once told me, you can do that with some animals, you can't do it with all the animals. And so it's all about choice. We want to make sure there's a level playing field. And so for those companies that do choose to take that path, there's a premium price that comes with that. And there's a consumer group that's willing to pay for it. But the vast majority of customers are really just trying to stay focused on science and to ensure that they're collaborating with their supply chain partners, farmers in particular. They're leaning on the veterinarians and the science, and they're doing so in a very transparent manner so that those who do have questions have easy access to easy answers.
You say that they're science-led, but obviously retailers have to respond to what consumers want. So how is that changing product lines, and are you really confident that they can be led by science rather than opinion?
So how do we talk about science in a way that people can understand it and have confidence that the industry is moving forward, obviously using antibiotics in this case judiciously and responsibly, and striving to reduce the need for antibiotics? What else are we doing as a pig production industry to effectively improve health and reduce the dependence on antibiotics? Those are all important stories to tell that are grounded in science, but clearly delivered in a way that normal lay people can understand.
What kind of trends do you think we're going to be seeing over the next 5 years?
The trend truly is about this intersection of health and wellness and sustainability. And food is right square in the middle of it. And I spend some time in Silicon Valley, and I hear people there talking about food as if it's the new internet. So a lot of tech and venture capitalists investing in food to change the food system. And it's all about individualized nutrition. So how do we effectively, use technology to tailor the best nutritional profile for you for optimal body performance? And again, sensors and lots of technology that enables that, and do so in a responsible manner. Clearly, there's a lot of attention and dialogue that's happening around food industry production in general, livestock production specifically, and the impact that it has on the environment. So how can we effectively grow in our food production and do so in a responsible manner? That's truly where the food industry is heading, and you'll see continuous development, innovation, and products that meet those expectations.
Is individual nutrition something that producers can really get involved with?
It's a great question. I believe so, because protein is critically important, and clearly there are a lot of options for protein for consumers. But if we can talk about and show transparency, right, and traceability, how pigs in particular are raised and produced to deliver, optimal protein for optimal body performance, I believe there's some value for producers to capture in that dialogue and in that intersection. And so, again, with technology evolving as quickly as it is, farm to fork is becoming a real thing in terms of transparency and traceability to prove that. And I believe there'll be a higher demand for protein products like pork to meet those individual nutrition needs.
In terms of trends then that you touched on there, obviously plant-based meat is getting a lot of attention. Do you think that that's going to be a trend that will continue?
I do. It's something that's been around for a long time, quite candidly. The black bean burger, as an example. My first job in my career was for a company called Kehi Foods back in 1996, and we sold specialty food products. They still do to this day. But we sold the Boca Burger and products like that. So they've always been a part of the marketplace choice. There's been a segment of consumers that are interested in that. We call them flexitarians. That's not how they self-identify, but in the food industry, that's how kind of labeled plant-forward diet, they haven't excluded meat. It's just a balance between, eat your vegetables, just like my mother told me since I can remember my mom talking to me, eat your vegetables. And so we believe with the growth in the global population that there's room for both. It's truly about choice. We want to ensure it's a level playing field. That's critically important. But that trend is here to stay. And it's truly something that I think pork can be part of that blended dialogue and discussion as it relates to plants and protein. And we're positioning ourselves accordingly.
Do you think that trend has the potential to continue? Because obviously we've got the concern about the environmental impact of livestock production and the growing interest in veganism. Do you think it is something that the industry needs to be concerned about?
I think the industry certainly needs to be aware of it. I think the industry needs to understand what the consumer needs are that this product is trying to fit and fill, and how does pork essentially align with those product needs. And quite candidly, there's a misperception about pork products in the U.S. specifically and the nutritional value that fresh pork offers, as well as its environmental story.
So that perspective is obviously something that seems to be the top consumer concern, or the one we hear about a lot at the minute. One of the other big ones is animal welfare. How much is that still in the mindset of consumers at the minute?
It's interesting. We do a lot of research in that space, and consumers can't really articulate it very well. In other words, they can't say exactly what they're concerned about. What they are interested in is knowing that the animals were well taken care of, well provided for, and that's it. That's pretty much it. It's an emotional need, and so that requires a story, and the story from credible sources. So clearly, veterinarians they have tremendous credibility with consumers, and now it's about messaging. How do we effectively talk about all of the practices in pork production in particular, and how that's designed to ensure optimal care for the animals based in scientific discovery, et cetera. And so again, when our initial research and pilot projects and sort of connecting these dots with consumers in terms of how pigs are raised today, there's favorability increases with people. So it's all about transparency and sort of opening the barn doors and allowing people to come in and seeing how we're doing what we're doing on pig farms every day. And it's proven to be effective at instilling confidence and building trust.
What do you think the next big welfare issue could be?
Yeah, the next big welfare issue, I believe, is in line with housing, just confinement in general. The environmental impact that the pork industry has, a tremendous story. Less than 0.5% of greenhouse gas emissions in this country comes from pork production. That's a tremendous story. And we're rapidly heading towards carbon neutrality, which is a fantastic story. But in order to do that, we need to continue to utilize some of these production facilities that unfortunately have the perception of cramped conditions. And again, we have to open the doors and show people exactly what's involved inside those barns, how the pigs are behaving, and climate control, et cetera. And that, once again, builds trust. But there will be a lot of dialogue and continued dialogue about conventional farming practices and specifically confinement facilities, and how we communicate about that and what happens inside of those barns will be critically important to instilling confidence and trust for future growth.
So just finally then, have you got any messages or any thoughts that you would want to share with pig producers and veterinarians about these relationships with customers?
There's 3 key points. Number one, it's about empathy. There's a kind of an understanding that whatever people feel, it's an emotional feeling. And so you may not agree with it, but it sure helps when you can at least sort of justify and come from an empathetic perspective. Instead of being across the table, maybe be on the same side of the table and start a conversation there. Number 2, it's about transparency. Man, we do good work in the pork industry, and more people need to know about that. There's trust and confidence in the system when credible people like veterinarians in particular talk about the good work that's happening in the food system. And then number 3, in pork production in particular, number 3 is about collaboration. Let's co-create. Let's figure out what Subway, what McDonald's, what Walmart, what their expectations are, what are their needs, and how do we effectively build a partnership that creates mutually beneficial solutions so that all partners in the pork value chain can benefit from that. Obviously, I work for the pork checkoff. I work for the pork producers. They pay me to be the food person out talking with these food companies. And in my experience, and certainly most recent experience, those are the 3 key points that I think will help us grow together moving forward.
We've been speaking to Jarrod Sutton, who's Senior Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at the National Pork Board. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.